Welcome to the Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva, and today we're going to get some insight into Ice Cream University. My guest today is Malcolm Stogo. He is the owner of Ice Cream University. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so usually I start my guests where you went to college. So where'd you go to school?
So I went to Ryder College, believe it or not,
Wow.
in Trenton, New Jersey. I was the last class where the campus was in Trenton, New Jersey. So I spent 4 years in Trenton. It was fabulous. It's a long story, but we loved Trenton. We had a great time there, and I was very young. It was back in the '60s, and I spent more time. I hate to say it, not in school, but doing other things. But it was great, and it was a great experience, and it just goes to show you that when you're young, you do some stupid things, and when you get older, you realize how stupid they were.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, it all came out well. Um, and so I'll back it up real fast and say to you. So when I was in college, I had three roommates, and we spent the entire day outside of class gambling, going to the racetrack, playing poker, everything under the sun outside of class. But at the end of the day, we all graduated college, and 30 or 40 years later, each of us is very successful in life
Wow.
because we all learned that you don't necessarily have to be the smartest person in the room, but it's what you do with yourself and what you do with your life afterwards.
Sure.
And that's basically what happened. All my roommates basically have done very, very well in life. And we all came from the same background. We all were very loose when we were in school, but we all got out of school and we all basically went into business for ourselves. And here we are, 30, 40 years later. Everyone's doing very well, really.
So tell me, back then, how was it getting into a college like Ryder College, now Ryder University, of course?
Well, I mean, I don't think it was very difficult. The one thing I do remember is that my parents, were middle class basically, and we didn't have a lot of money. But I remember my parents went to some bank in, I think it was outside Trenton, I forget where it was, and they signed up for some kind of a loan fund to pay for my college education.
Sure.
And if I remember correctly, my college education cost 20,000, a little over $20,000 for 4 years, not counting my living expenses. Big
Well,
difference.
so now, while you're there, what did you think of the college experience when you were there?
Well, we were the last class in Trenton, and it was also the first year they opened up the Lawrenceville campus. So we were in Trenton. So we really weren't part of that Lawrenceville campus experience. We were really part of the downtown Trenton experience,
Yeah.
which is very, very different. Um, and also on the weekends, most of us on the weekends actually went home. We didn't necessarily stay in Trenton for the weekends.
Sure.
Um, where if you were in Lawrenceville, you probably could have stayed there over the weekends. So and I was from Philadelphia, so it was only an hour away. Not like it was a long trip. So, but I really, I mean, I love having. We had an apartment, and we all shared it. We basically went out to eat every night of the week. No, I don't think we ever cooked a meal.
Sure.
And it was downtown. It was very it was really very it was a very interesting experience, and I don't regret it for 1 second.
Great. So
Um, I was very happy.
so now you graduate from Ryder. How does one go from graduating from Ryder to becoming the owner of Ice Cream University?
Well, that's a really long story. I went in the army for 6 months. It was 1963. I was in the U.S. medics, and I'm Jewish, and you have to remember the atmosphere at the time. It was 63. So if you didn't volunteer for reserves, you were drafted basically. So the choice was, what do you want to do? You want to be drafted, or you want to join the reserves? So like any young kid, I joined the reserves, the medics, and I went down to Fort Sam Houston, Texas for training. I originally in Fort Dix, basic training. Then went to Fort Sam Houston. Down there was fantastic. I came back from that experience, and I got my first job working for a uniform manufacturer um, in Quantico, Virginia, out of Philadelphia. And I left that, then went for a dental manufacturer. And then about 3 years later, in about 1960, probably in 66, probably 66, I got a job working for a wig manufacturer in Philadelphia who had factories in the Far East. That was my first really big experience of life, really, when you get down to it. Because the owner of the company was very liberal, and I lived in a section of Philadelphia called Germantown,
Mhm.
which is also very liberal. And I got involved in politics, and I was a hippie, proud to say it. And and then it was right around 67, around 67. I I met this gentleman from Philadelphia. He was a city councilman. Who was running for mayor of Philadelphia against Frank Rizzo, who was the police commissioner of Philadelphia. And I wanted to be involved in politics because I was living in Germantown. So so I went to my boss. Believe it or not, it's an amazing story when you think about it. And I told him I wanted to be involved in this political campaign for this guy who was running for mayor of Philadelphia against Frank Rizzo. And I said I wanted to have a leave of absence for 6 months. I had a very good relationship with my boss. He was very liberal. And so he said to me, "Okay, let's talk about it." So he he said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to New York today or tomorrow. Why don't you come up at the train with me to New York? We'll talk about it on the train, and we'll see what happens." So got on the train with him. He starts telling me about when he got out of college after World War II. He wanted to go into the steel business, and his father talked him out of it. He said it
Wow.
was one of the worst decisions he ever made in his life. He said, and he's realized now he's a little bit older that you need to take chances in life. So he says to me, if you really want to do this so-called political thing, take a leave of absence, it's okay with me, but you have to do one thing. I was in charge of all his money. So my deal was he would pay me my full salary, believe it or not,
Wow.
but I had to work from 9 to 12 every day. At 12 o'clock, I can leave and do whatever I want for 6 months. So I did that. So the first month I worked from 9 to 12. After the first month, I really hardly worked at all. But the first month I did work at 9 to 12, and I had this campaign. The campaign was over. I got involved with Eugene McCarthy in the presidential campaign of 67, 68. And I with Eugene McCarthy, and I would then with Bobby Kennedy, and I was involved in the Kennedy campaign, who I loved dearly. Probably the greatest experience, one of the greatest experiences of my life, that campaign. And after that was over, my wife, who was at that time my first wife, was a school teacher in Philadelphia, at Riverbrook High School, where Will Chamberlain went to. So we decided I had to go back to work.
Hmm.
So we decided that I was a little frustrated at the same time that I really want to go back to work. So we decided we didn't have any kids. We decided to take a trip around the world. So we did. I left work. We took a trip around the world for 6 months.
Wow.
All right. Went all around the world. And while we're traveling around the world, we started out in South America, then went over to Africa, and from Africa into Europe, and eventually ended up in Scandinavia at the end of 6 months. And that trip actually cost $13,000 for
Wow.
6 months. Amazing. And during that trip, we had a lot of different foods, ate a lot of different foods, and we decided when we come back to Philadelphia, let's go into the restaurant business, because we had fooled around before we left. We had fooled around starting a catering business, small catering business. That came out because we went to a wedding or a bar mitzvah, I forget what it was, and the food was terrible. And we looked at each other and says we could do a better job than this. So we started a small catering business, and we were very successful in the beginning. Really, I mean, we had no idea what we were doing. but it worked out well. And so when I came back from this trip, for this overseas trip for 6 months, which is like unbelievable. I mean, it's like unbelievable trip. It's just unbelievable. I was actually almost killed in Africa, but that's another story. Um, on the safari. So I came back to Philadelphia, decided to open a restaurant, and I opened a restaurant in Philadelphia, downtown Philadelphia, called Someplace Different. It was basically featuring foods from all over the world. And it was a self-service restaurant.
Yeah.
And the day we opened, we had not one penny in the bank. But we got lucky, very lucky, and we ended up being pretty successful. And I ended up opening at one time. I had 3 restaurants in Philadelphia at one time
Wow.
over about 12-year period of time. I had my ups and I had my downs, and then I eventually got divorced. It's another story. But we had this food, and so in my third restaurant, which was in Chestnut Hill, Philadelphia, um, there was an ice cream store next to my restaurant, and the ice cream store went out of business.
Hmm.
So we decided to make ice cream in our restaurant. This was 1978. All right. And we had no idea what we were doing. Really, seriously, no idea. So we went out and we bought I went out and I bought a book on how to make ice cream. And I bought a White Mountain, a rock salt ice machine that makes ice cream with rock salt and ice. And we made our first ice cream. And then we went to the supermarket. We bought Oreo cookies. We put them in the machine, and out came Oreo ice cream. And we were, I mean, my daughter at that time was 5 years old. And so we put her on top of an ice machine. She helped separate the whites and the yellows from eggs for the eggs for the ice cream. It's about 13 dozen eggs at a time.
Wow.
If you ask her today, she refuses to make ice cream today. She remembers that experience. But we're very successful from the very beginning. And I'll never forget the first time we actually sold ice cream in a supermarket in Elkins Park, New York, a gourmet supermarket. We were doing a sampling program. This is very important, actually. So we were giving out these samples, and I had this table set up by a freezer, and woman was eating our ice cream, and she says, "Wow, this is fantastic." It was called Malcolm's Homemade. She says, "Well, who's Malcolm?" So I was sitting like 10 feet away, and I said, "Oh, that's me." Well, I have to tell you, and there's a reason why I'm telling you this story. It made me feel so fantastic that someone actually loved my ice cream, right? Right here in my heart. And it's where I get the word passion comes from. I'm pretty passionate about a lot of things. But it's important that when you're in business, you have passion for what you're doing.
Sure.
Right? I mean, otherwise you waste your time. Really, seriously. And so that set us off, and then at some point, by a couple years, 2 years, 3 years later, we sold the restaurants. I got divorced. I moved to New York. I got remarried again, and I got lucky. And I use the word lucky because it's an important word for me because I believe in luck. This is my whole life, by the way. In luck, being in the right place at the right time and taking advantage of it. Yep. That to me is the secret of my so-called success. Luck. So I moved to New York, and I went to an employment agency in the food industry because I had customers in Philadelphia and one of my restaurants who owned a food employment agency in Philadelphia, and they had an office in New York. And I knew the owners in Philadelphia. So I went to this place in New York, and I sat down with these guys, and I told them what I wanted to do. I really didn't want to go in the restaurant business again, but I wanted to go in the ice cream business. So she said, "Well, I know this guy, these guys down in the village, the West Village, who are making pretty good ice cream. Why don't you go down and see those guys, and maybe something will happen." These two guys, in my opinion, even today, are probably the two most creative people I've ever met in my life in the ice cream business. Amazing, just amazing. I learned a lot from them actually in a short period of time. Then I got lucky again. I met somebody from a supplier who told me about someone who's opened up a big ice cream operation down at the South Street Seaport in New York. So I went down to see this guy. He had owned about 7 or 8 restaurants in New York, and so he was opening this place up because he had this idea of this ice cream place from Italy, a gelato basically. And so we formed a partnership. We opened up at the South Street Seaport. It was called Ice Cream Extravaganza, and that was probably my very big first success, really big success. And so I was there for about 6 years. Um, so let me just backtrack real fast. So when I was in Philadelphia, we made those Oreo ice cream. So 3 months later, I got a letter from Nabisco telling me to cease and desist. I cannot call it Oreo ice cream, and I cannot use Oreo in the ice cream. That
Sure.
was it's like 45 years ago. Well, today Nabisco sells, the company owns the Oreos. They probably sell over $100 million worth of broken Oreo cookies to the ice cream industry. But
Sure.
45 years ago, they told me not to use Oreos in the ice cream, believe it or not. So I changed it. So I changed the name from Oreo ice cream to cookies and cream. So I invented cookies and cream ice cream.
Wow.
And at the same time, I also invented Milky Way and Snickers ice cream at the same time, all in that 1 year. So now I'm back to New York here again. So we opened the South Street Seaport. Pure luck, be at the right place at the right time. And in 6 years, I was there for about 6 years, from 83 through 88, 89. We actually had the largest ice cream store in the United States in volume, doing about $1.5 million in business in one location, which is in today's world, 1,100 square feet of space would be like $5 million today,
Sure.
today's dollars. And while I was there, I invented the chocolate dip waffle cone while I was there. Because some guy came into our store and wanted some of these waffle cones from Denmark. And I said to him, well, why do I want to buy these cones? Um, he said, we're making our own cones. We make about 300 a day. We sell them out every day. Like, why would I want to buy your cones? So he made this. He said to me, well, why don't you take them on consignment? If you don't sell them, you'll give them back to me. So I said, fine. So at the time, I've been fooling around dipping little sugar cones in chocolate for like 25 cents extra. So we decided to dip these waffle cones in chocolate. And all of a sudden, we became a hit with these cones inside our store. So when he brought these cones into me, he brought me about, it was a skid of cones, about 8,000 cones. We sold them out in less than 2 weeks.
Wow.
And so I invented the chocolate dip waffle cone. So in about a 6 year period of time, I made a lot of money with these cones, a lot of money. We would sell an average of 10,000 dip waffle cones on a weekend alone.
So how did you end up getting the university part of it?
Okay, so in 1988, 89, I decided, I'd been on my feet for about 15 years, and I decided I wanted to change my life. And I had the idea of writing a book on how to make ice cream, industrial ice cream. And I also when I was down at the seaport, since we had this unusual store, people from all over the world would come up to me and say to me, how do you do this? How do you do that? And I was standing there all day long answering questions free of charge. So I said to myself, why don't I become a consultant? So I had the idea of becoming a consultant and writing a book almost about the same time. My partner, who owned about 7 or 8 restaurants, was starting to get into financial trouble in his restaurants. So, and I really kind of like wanted to get out. So we made a deal with the owners of the seaport to sell our business back to them. It took us about a little over a year to do it. We did it, and I became free to become a consultant and to write a book.
How do people get involved with coming to the university and learning about ice cream?
Well, it's most of it's by word of mouth, believe it or not, and most of it by word of mouth, and the reason why I got into the university business or seminar business to begin with was because this is the very beginning of the internet. I got an email from some guy from, believe it or not, from, I think it was from Greece or Spain, I forget where it was, said he wanted, we just started our seminars, and he wanted to come to our seminar. Well, actually, before he wouldn't be, I forget what it was. It's a long time ago. And I figured, well, if this guy wants to come from Spain to come to the United States to a workshop, this has to be a pretty good idea. So that's how we really started the university. We started to have our first class, and what happened was, and this is 1992. No one was really doing this in those days.
Sure.
So I did an advertisement in some IC magazine, and out of the clear blue sky, like 30, 40 people called me on the telephone. They wanted to come to a workshop.
Wow.
It was like amazing. I couldn't believe it. It was like unbelievable. So we ended up doing our first workshop in 92. And here I am, 30 years later. We do an average about 35 workshops a year.
And how long are the classes to learn about ice cream?
It could be 3 days, 2 days, or 1 day.
Wow.
And then they transfer into what we call private consulting, where we basically, what we do that's different than anybody else is that our classes are very small in size, and they're very personal, and we're very hands-on.
Mhm.
And what we do that really no one else does is that when you graduate from our seminar at university, you stay with us. You don't leave us. So people know they can pick up the phone, send an email anytime, and we'll answer the questions, help them along.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of the reasons why we're successful today is because we're always there to help.
So we're coming to the end of our show.
Go ahead.
What advice do you want to give to the parents and students that might be interested in taking some of these seminars and learning about ice cream?
Well, I think for parents or even for students or college students, I mean, first of all, almost every college student in general, this is where I'm really very generalized here. I mean, most kids don't have no idea what they want to do in life, right? And my partner Bill Lambert taught me that we have to learn how to give back. And one of the ways we always give back is that we give out a lot of scholarships. So if we find a young person who's very passionate about an idea or want to go in the ice cream business, and if they don't have any money, we don't charge them a penny.
Wow.
So we believe very strongly in when you're young, and this is very important for parents or young people to think about, is that I have this theory. It's called the 15-year theory. And the theory is about going into business. You go to college, graduate college, and now you don't have a clue what you want to do in your life. So my 15-year theory is, say you graduate college at 22, and you want to go into business. So you have 15 years to explore this business, to go into business. You're now 37. At 37, you want to start another career for another 15 years. So you go from 37 to 52. That's your second career. Then you have another career from 52 to 67. Could be your third career, 15 years.
Sure.
Because after a certain period of time, people get bored with what they're doing. They want to start to do something else. And then your last career could be from 67 into your 80s. So basically, a young person has 4 or 5 careers in front of their face. And what I try to tell people all the time who come to me, especially young people, is don't be afraid to take a chance in life. And also, you need to understand also, which is very, very important, that life is short. And if you don't take advantage of things, because you never know what's going to happen the next day. So I'm a strong believer in telling people to take a chance. Another thing is that I've been successful and I've had failures, but I've learned a lot from my failures. And what I've learned is you can always come back.
Great.
If you work hard enough and you're passionate what you're doing, and passion is really important.
Malcolm, thank you very much for coming on the show. I appreciate it. And so you've been watching The Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva. Until next time.